topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hi, welcome to Learning to Dance in the Rain. I'm Shelby Wagner, your host of Learning to Dance in the Rain, and I bring you guest experts and interesting information about things that happen in life too, and I bring you ideas for managing and coping with situations that are not always pleasant. I do bring, I hope, some pleasant things in to view also. Perhaps, I want to help you to learn to manage and cope with your problems and with resilience so you can get on to enjoying life. And if you haven't, this is my number 65th episode. And so all of my episodes are on YouTube at Shelby Wagner. And they are also on my website, learningtodanceintherain.com. So you might want to go back and check out some of them if I'm not talking about your problem tonight. But tonight, we're not talking about a problem. We're talking about an innovation. I have guest speaker is a math teacher at Sturgis High School. And she's taught mathematics in both the middle school and high school levels for 23 years. She has a passion for mathematics education, and she continues to innovate her teaching with research-based routines to allow her students to become mathematical thinkers. Her goal is for students to see joy in learning math by discovering concepts and making connections between old and new knowledge. She's a former digital interactive developer for Great Minds, Eureka Math, a Desmos Fellows for 2019, a cohort 4. You're going to have to tell us about that. A math consultant and coach at St. Mary's Assumption School in Brunson, Michigan, 2020 to 23. Come on out here, Robin. Building thinking classrooms and Desmos technology here. I am very interested, and I hope my audience is also. Can you tell me what inspired you to become a math teacher, and what was your journey like so far?
Well, in school, I was not very good at math, and I think this is a kind of a typical story. Either math teachers were really good at math and loved math right away, or struggled, and I struggled quite a bit when I was younger. It wasn't until high school when I started understanding what was going on, and I had those aha moments, and I noticed other students in my class didn't have the aha moments, and I enjoyed helping them. So the fact that I could offer support then kind of led me to become a teacher. So I love both math now and helping students. And so it's the love of both of those items that have led me to be a teacher.
So how did you first learn about building thinking classrooms?
Well, I left teaching in 2019 and became a digital interactives developer, and which means I wrote curriculum for Eureka Math Squared and developed digital lessons. And part of that time with that company, we were researching new innovations in teaching, and I had read the book Building Thinking Classrooms and was very interested in how that would look in a classroom. And then in 2022, I went back to teaching, and that was the first thing I wanted. I told my principal I want whiteboards all around my room. That was one of the stipulations for me coming back, because I wanted to try to build a thinking classroom. And quite honestly, I had always tried to build a thinking classrooms, but the practices in the book really helped develop the thinking.
All right. And Desmos Classroom, what is that? Is that
So when I want to say 2013, we adopted one-to-one at technology iPads at my school, and we're challenged with the challenge of trying to figure out how to use technology in our classrooms. And I ran across Desmos at the time. It was Desmos Calculator, and it is a graphing calculator where students can type in and kind of play around with math. And it's much easier to use than the TI calculators that we were using at the time. And then Desmos Classroom has more of a platform where teachers can assign lessons, and the lessons are very innovative and interesting. Like, students basically get to play around with math and try things out in a non-threatening way before they decide on the answer. So I was enjoying the thinking that it was bringing into my classroom.
I see. And I believe we have a picture of your classroom. So would you explain what a building thinking classroom looks like? Wow. And practice.
So there's 14 practices of building thinking classrooms, and it's recommended that you start with the first 3 at least, which one being students work at the vertical non-permanent surfaces, whiteboards, or it could be windows, but it needs to be vertical, and they need to be able to erase what they're writing. So if they make a mistake, it's easy to correct. They found out that students are much more likely to engage quickly with the math if they're not threatened by making mistakes. So, and if they make a mistake, they can erase it, and it's not as scary as writing with a pencil and erasing it and leaving marks. And so that's one of the practices. The other is you have to start with a thinking task. So a thinking task is something that the students have not seen before. So they're not just redoing problems that I've shown them how to do. They're actually talking about a task that they really don't know how to do yet, and problem solving through that. And then the other one is they work in groups of 3, random groups of 3. So they found out that students are much more likely to engage if they're working with 3 people, and it's random, because they knew students in the past feel like teachers purposely put them in a certain group because of their ability or who they don't want them to work with. And students resent this a little bit. And so by having random groups, it takes that out. And it's only one time. So random groups every time you do something, it's a new random group. So it's not a group, the same group for a week. It's one day. So you can work with anybody for one day.
So you draw their names out of a hat, or?
It's recommended that you use playing cards. So I sort through and put 3 of each in there, and then you can kind of sort how many students you have in your room, and then you hand out cards and they go to that board.
I see.
And then there's always the chance, the part is some students are very nervous about finding a group if you just let them pick their own groups. And then also you always have the chance of working with your friends. So, and we honor that. There's some groups that you're like, ooh, maybe they shouldn't be working together, but they get to work together because it's random groups, and it works out very well. There are other practices, but those are the 3 that get you going.
I see. Do you ever have any student who just, no, I don't want to work with that one? Or
there are, especially in the beginning of the year. We start out, when I first started it, we just started it in November, because that was when I thought, well, I was ready to start it. But now that I've been using it for a few years, the first week of school is working on what we call non-curricular tasks, which could be, and this one is a curricular task, but it would be more like a game like Ultimate Tic-Tac-Toe, or something where it's not threatening to the students, and
Mhm.
then also doing icebreakers where they get to know each other, because a lot of them just don't know each other, so it's uncomfortable for them to work with people that they don't know.
Oh,
But the changing the random groups every time helps with that. They get to know each other, they get to know who they like to work with, who they don't like to work with, but there's always a chance that they get to work with who they want to, so they appreciate that.
and I suppose it will rotate around so that they will get to work with that a person another time later on. Right.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
and it's scary. It's always scary to work with somebody new, but as you work with people more and you get to know them and you get to make friends and connections and find out that, oh, they do know their math and they can help me, or oh, we're going to be in the musical this year together,
Oh,
and just find connections there. So it takes some time, and some nudging, but
so
eventually they'll work
how do
together.
you help them adjust to this in the through the games where they get to know each other and so on at the beginning of the year, and by the time you start putting them in groups, then they kind of feel more comfortable with one another.
Yeah, well, and icebreakers, like we do one icebreaker that talks about what kind of ice cream do you like, and then you have to come up with a ice cream for the group. I mean, just getting to know each other in a non-threatening way
Oh, that
at the
sounds
beginning.
like fun. You can get them talking.
Hmm.
Let's see. Um, BTC, Building Thinking Classrooms, encourages random grouping and vertical non-permanent surfaces. That's what you said. So how have these strategies changed student engagement in your classroom?
Well, they don't have a choice to not engage, so they're working on a problem at the boards, and just the nature of the non-permanent surfaces, they're not afraid to write stuff down and erase it, so they get started right away. Everybody can see it, so that it's easy for them to point and talk and offer suggestions. There's only one marker, so you can see with a group of boys, they had one marker, and they're all kind of talking about what's going on and double checking the work and collaborating on what's going on. So that helps. And then also, I'm walking around like while they're working. My job is to walk around and answer questions, but not answer. In the beginning, we know that students really want to ask, like, is it right? Or just ask a question
Well,
because
I
the
don't know
teacher
where
is
to start, Mrs.
right. I don't know what to do. And so helping them develop some confidence in their work and themselves. And they say to always call it, or to only answer keep thinking questions. So there's stop thinking questions, which is is it right? You know, are we doing it right? Was this the right step? That's going to stop thinking. The only questions I answer are the keep thinking questions. So maybe something where they're a little bit stuck and they ask a question, and I'll ask them a question, usually just to start getting them thinking again, but making sure that it continues.
Okay, so how do you balance structured lessons with freedom that building thinking classrooms encourages?
So
The
as you can
balance.
tell, there is a lot of freedom because they're standing up and they're working at the boards. And I guess it's just the expectation that you're working with your group and you're staying there. There will be some times that kids will wander around and you just shush them back to their group and ask them a question. Also walking around and just sometimes I'll take the marker. Like if a student isn't helping, or if there's one student who's always using the marker, I'll just kind of say, oh, give me the marker, let's talk about it, and then I'll hand the marker to another student, so that student now has to write and be part of it. The honestly, the ability to see what all students are doing at once, I can stand in the middle of the room and see what's going on and who's working and who's not, is very helpful when they're all at their desks working. You can't see what they're working on. They're very good at hiding what they're working on and looking busy when they're not. So there is no way to hide when they're standing at the boards. And it's very obvious when students are not on task, but generally they're busy talking to each other and helping each other out.
So they get into the groove. Is there one problem that they solved during that 45-minute or 60-minute class? Or
No, there's different types of thinking problems. Our curriculum is very heavy on problem solving, and so the curriculum already has a lot of thinking problems and that they work through. If you don't have a curriculum that has the problem solving base built in already, what is suggested is you can take like a long chain of problems and do what we call thin slicing, where you take you know what they know, and so you write questions that are just a little bit above what they know already. So there's just one step that maybe they have to kind of think and talk about. And it's a sequence of problems. And you can see the boys were working on that on the window of my door. But just one little step, like, oh, you accomplished that. So now let's try this problem. Oh, there's one thing different. How does that affect how you're going to talk about it and solve it? And then one more problem that's a little bit more in depth, and then they work through the sequence.
is there ever a time when one group might solve that problem in a different way than another group? Or is there?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the hope, is there's different ways of doing it, and they look around and then they start talking about it. What is nice about the boards is it's very visual, and the students can look around if they need help, or also look at other answers and go, I wonder, they got a different answer than I did. Are they right? Are we right? And they can go and talk to that group and say, how did you get that answer? And we thought of it this way. And so it just adds to a lot of discussion, not just between the three students that are working together on the problem, but all the students in the classroom. And I'll see little scouts sometimes. Like, there's students, like, they send them out to go ask another group how they did it, and then they'll come back and they'll tell their group, and that happens very naturally. So, but yes, it's fun to watch how they work on the problems.
No,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We call that knowledge mobility. So the fact that knowledge doesn't stay with the group because it's visible, knowledge will travel from group to group to group. And it doesn't come from me. I mean, I can help, but what's wonderful is they're helping each other, and they're seeing themselves and their classmates as experts instead of just the teacher knows it.
I think that's wonderful. I remember I substitute taught for trigonometry class one. That was one of the classes in the high school I had to do. And I was scared to death. And trigonometry, wow. I had stopped at algebra. And I walked in there, and, there were mostly seniors, of course, but there were 2 or 3 freshmen boys. And when they got in, they sat down. I said, well, Miss Wagner, do you know how to do trigonometry? And I said, no, I don't. He says, I have a suggestion. And I said, what is it? And he says, could we have 2 groups or whatever, 3, and each one of these freshman boys lead that group with the rest of us, and let us, work together in a group like this? I said, that sounds like a wonderful idea to me, as long as you promise you're going to behave, yourself. You know how they treat substitute teachers. And so, by golly, they got to work, and they worked that whole class that hour. And when they left, they said, thank you, Miss Wagner. That's the best math class we ever had. And they learned from each other, and doing, at the desk there. And I learned a lot myself that day, and I really appreciated it. And had a good time in spite of my fright.
Well, and I think that's the point, is we want students to be the doers of math and not the followers of Mrs. Kubasiak showing them how to do it, math.
Right.
They need to take ownership of their own learning and help each other. And by explaining, they're internalizing the math a lot more. And they're surprised at what they know. You know, every student has something to add to that conversation, because when one student is stuck, the other student can fill in what's missing. And then if they're all stuck, another group can help them, or I can help them.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they need a challenge, I'm free to also give them something to think about. If they're done, there's no time that students are done in a thinking classroom. There's always another problem. So if a group is working really quickly, then there's another problem.
So all of that mathematics that I saw up there on the whiteboard, did they put that there, or did you put some of it there, or how did you get into?
Oh no, well, this is a mind map. And so what we've started doing this year is at the end of every chapter, I have students make a mind map of the chapter. And so this is all of their work, and kind of summarizing what they learned from that chapter. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about it, so in this one, this is Algebra 2, and they were working on sequences. So this is everything from that chapter that they thought was important to write down. And then I take pictures of them, and then they have it for their notes.
Oh, wow.
And then here, there's students are deriving the quadratic formula, which I honestly didn't know how to do until I looked it up. But all of my students could derive the quadratic formula. So the only thing I believe that was given to them is the very first equation with at the top of the box, where the 4a squared x squared. Yep. Okay. And from there, their goal was to solve for x. So they did it all.
Wow. And that's what you do every day.
Well, and that's the power. They can help each other out. They're talking about it. They're looking around at other groups. If they're stuck, you know, they have a model. They have the area model to help them factor. That's a powerful tool as well. So they can do it. If you believe they can, they can.
So can you share a specific success story of a student or class that thrived under the building better or thinking classrooms?
I think right now the story is the community that the classroom turns into. The one thing I noticed last year was my first full year doing it. And at the end, they're all working together, and you could see they were solving the quadratic formula. But when school starts over and you have a new crop of students, it takes time to build it. And so in August, I got to remind myself, these are not the same students, and you have to build the thinking classroom over again. So the success is right now at the end of the year, as we're approaching the end of the year, when they're at working together. And it's just pretty much it's easy because they know what to do and they're helping each other. And the class, I guess the thinking has been built. So they're thinking, even when they're sitting, I have them in groups of 4, and they talk to each other and they're helping each other out and they're solving, versus at the beginning of the year, they're very quiet and they don't want to talk to each other. And they very much want me to tell them what to do. So they only see me as the expert, as the only expert, versus towards the end of the year, they see each other as experts.
Oh, that's great. What, which grade level are you teaching?
I teach Algebra 2 and Geometry. So Algebra 2 has a little bit of everybody in there, but it would be mainly sophomores and juniors. And then Geometry, same thing, is mainly sophomores, but there's some freshmen and juniors in there as well.
I see. Okay. So what makes a Desmos Classroom a game changer in math education?
Well, in Desmos, I started doing Desmos before building thinking classrooms. I'd been using it for many years. What attracted me to Desmos was the same as building thinking classrooms, and the fact that they students are interacting with something that they don't know the answer to, and they're working together. So it is interactive, or it is technology. So they're working on their Chromebook, but they work in groups of 2 or in pairs and only one device. And then that kind of adds to the collaboration. But it's there's an interactive, so it's not just the computer telling them if they're right or not. They have some type of interactive that's going on. I guess the one that I think I can describe the best would be, there's stars on the screen. We call it marble slides. There's stars on the screen in some type of order, and the students have to write an equation to go through the stars, but then there's this marble that goes down on the like rolls on the equation and goes through the stars. So they can change the equations to try to match. So they'll try an equation, it'll work, it won't work, and then they'll keep adjusting the equation until it does. But that they're learning about how the equation affects the graph, but they're doing it in a way that's fun because they feel success when the marble goes through the stars. So, but the biggest part with Desmos is there's a way you can interact with math, with technology, that you can't interact with equations and writing it down. And it's just this playful like discovery, like, oh, let's try this. Oh, it works. Oh, it doesn't work. Let's try this. And so they get to play with math in a way that wasn't possible without it. But it's more than it just, a lot of technology is, here, try the problem. Yes, it's right. No, it's not. And it's very much just a bunch of worksheets on the screen, and they're just working through problems, and the technology is telling them yes or no. Desmos does a really good job of not telling them that they're right or wrong. They know they're right or wrong because of the interactive, like the feedback it gives them.
Is this a good question? A time to ask my question about, are you talking about now? I saw on your website pictures of, there was a pumpkin, I think, and maybe a rock. And is that Desmos?
Yes. Yes.
How does that work?
So what you're describing is our Desmos art competition. And basically students take a picture or make a picture by writing a whole bunch of equations that graph. So the pumpkin, they wrote all different types of equations that made the part of the pumpkin, and they have to restrict the domain and the range to make it stop. So it's hard to say. It's hard to talk about it without a visual, but
I wish I had included a picture on that. But while we're here, what is your website? How could people learn more about this or contact you if they were interested in learning more?
Well, I'm Robin Kubasiak at gmail.com is my email. And probably the easiest one is I'm on X, and it's at Kubasiak Robin. And that has a link to my website. Also, Robin's Substack is my Substack blog. So that would be another way to look me up as well.
Is it, I'm sorry, I was trying to find your website just before we started, but in a sites at Sturgis High School or something?
No. It's it's a Google site. It's a long link, so it's not really easy to just say it. So I would say the easiest way would just be to connect on Twitter. So at Kubasiak Robin, and then that has my website and everything right there.
Oh, okay. And it's just X at Robin. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very good.
That would be the easiest one. Or email me at robinkubasiak at gmail.com.
Okay, very good. What, how do you use Desmos to foster deeper mathematical thinking? Did we talk about that one already?
Well, the deepness comes from the exploration. So they're exploring and they're making connections on their own, and they're not being told. So they're more likely to remember it. And honestly, an interactive can portray information much quicker than you could do it by explaining it. Yeah.
Really?
So, but just the connections that they make by interacting with whatever they're looking at. For instance, there's one where I love this one, Function Carnival. It's got this little guy that shoots out of a cannon, and then and then a parachute kind of opens up and they softly fall to the ground. And the students are going to graph the height of this person in the cannon. And the graph is right next to it. And so they draw the graph. Well, what's wonderful is as they hit play, it will trace the graph and it will put another little cannon guy and it will show where that cannon guy is compared to where it is on the graph. So they can compare how accurate their graph is just by referring to this little guy that just goes up. It's really fun.
Oh, yeah.
Function Carnival on Desmos. If you go to teacher.desmos.com is how you would get to that platform, and Function Carnival. And then I built one, and it was part of the Activity Builder Spotlight Challenge this year. And it was one of the winners, and it's called Adding Integers. And basically the students type in numbers, and there's this little spider on a number line. And we want students to think about adding integers as like, if you add positive numbers, you go to the right on the number line. If you are adding negative numbers, you go to the left. And so there's arrows that go one way or the other, and they pretty much come up with the algorithm for adding integers on their own. So they discover, if we add two positives, it goes right. So you're adding the numbers. If you had a positive and a negative, it's going to go right and then left. And then basically you're taking away. So adding the opposite is really comparable to subtraction. But they come up with the algorithm on their own.
Was this the award that I saw on your website? I think I sent it to Rebel, an award that you had won.
Yes.
Have you got that picture, Rebel? Yeah. Sturgis Public Schools like to congratulate Robin Kubasiak, High School Math, as a Desmos Classroom 2024 Activity Builder winner. That sounds like fun to me. Trying to get that little man shot out of that cannon.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the fun. They're enjoyable, so students like to do them, and they're thinking about math. And it's not about or right or wrong. It's about making connections between the math.
Right. Is that one of your favorite Desmos activities for engaging students, or you got?
I mean, I have several, but that ranks pretty high.
How about another one? Can you think of another one up there?
Well, the marble slides I was talking about, where this little marble falls on the graph, and it goes through some stars, and the students know if they're right or not by whether the marble goes through the stars, and then it says success. But they have one for linear, they have one for quadratic, so the different types of functions. So it's always kind of a nice introduction to that section. So they can play around with a quadratic, and it's non-threatening because it's just change one thing about this equation to make it work. And so they can just keep trying and seeing how it works, and then hopefully start making some connections with, if I plug in a -3, it's going left. If I plug in a +3, well, I guess it's the other way. But just how does changing it from a +3 to a -3 affect the graph?
Okay. Mm-hmm. So how do you use Desmos alongside B2C, and how do they complement each other?
Well, and that has been a thing I just wrote recently about in my most recent blog post about our digital tools cultivating learning. And I think with Desmos Classroom, because it doesn't just give you the answer, it's beneficial. I've been finding a lot of times the kids are just like, if you give them anything on the technology, they're just click, 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 click. I'm going to click, click, click my way through, or I'm going to look it up on Google, or I'm going to do everything I can to get this done, but not really learn anything. So with Desmos, it forces it, as we've talked about. And then building thinking classrooms is a space to write and talk and be very visual. So what I've been doing is, instead of groups of 2 on the Desmos, I have them in groups of 3. And instead of typing answers on the Chromebook, they write it on the whiteboards. So they're using the Desmos for the interactive, but then the answers and the explanation goes up on the whiteboard, and that solidifies what's going on. And it also gives students, it's hard to type math, so it's easier to put all of their answers on the whiteboard.
I see. So what advice would you give to teachers that might want to start using Desmos in their classroom?
Well, for both Desmos and BTC, I would say just jump in. And that's easier for some than others. I'm a teacher that's very comfortable with some change and some trial and error. But with technology, you're never going to have all of the ducks in the row, because there's always something that might go wrong. And so just knowing that ahead of time and just trying it, try it out yourself and know what your students are going to experience, but jump in. And same with building thinking classrooms. You're never going to have everything ready. It's just a matter of, and it's really hard to give up control sometimes. So you're just going to have to do it.
You've been teaching, haven't you? Some teachers, you've been traveling, I know, conferences in San Diego and up in Michigan, where you were a presenter. So how did those go?
Oh, very, very fun. In February, I was at the CPM, National CPM. CPM is a curriculum that I teach, their conference. And my session was on how to build a community of mathematical thinkers in the classroom. And basically it was how I use building thinking classrooms and just the idea of status to help build students up. So the random groups, the working together at boards, helps build a community, because they're getting to know each other, and they're also getting to see each other as a expert. But also what I do in the classroom is important. So when I'm walking around, I'm always trying to build up the students and say, oh, that's an interesting answer, build up their status, because typically the class where there's students that don't want to work together, it's mainly because they don't view each other as having the same status. So if you can build up student status, you can help build a better community in your classroom.
You had a blog available out there. Is that on Stacks?
Yes. Yes, there's a blog called Building Status.
I thought that was a very interesting thing. What are some misconceptions that people have about BTC or Desmos?
Well, with BTC, I would say they think it's just using whiteboards, and it's not. You have to have the pieces. So putting students on whiteboards with regular old problems after you've shown them how to do it is going to have the same result as doing a worksheet at their desk. So the biggest misconception is that it's just whiteboards. There's 14 practices that you need to do, or to start to do. You don't have to use all of them, but the first 3 are important to start, that you do them together. So whiteboards, thinking tasks, it's got to be thinking tasks, something you have not shown them how to do already. And so that they have something to talk about and problem solve at the boards, and then the random groups. And then there's more to it, like the teacher walking around and making sure students stay engaged. It's known that if students are if the challenge is too high, they're going to stop. And if they're bored, they're going to stop. So the job of the teacher is to walk around and make sure each group kind of stays in what we call a flow, where they're interested in solving the problem.
So if I walked into your classroom when they were doing this, what would I see? Would it be noisy? Would it be a lot of laughing? Would it be serious talking? What would I say?
Well, I feel like you described it all. So yes, you described a lot of it. Yes. So I mean, it is going to be noisy because yeah, because students are talking, and so I mean, there's laughter. I mean, that was the first thing I noticed. The first year I did it, my students would sit there in their desks and not talk to each other at all. But when they got to the boards, suddenly there were smiles and joking and interacting. So there is that. Sometimes you're going to see all of them at the board. Sometimes there's some wanderers, and you got to wander them back to their group. But I guess the biggest thing you're going to see is students doing and talking about math.
Okay. Some teachers might worry about whether the students would be prepared for the standardized test. How would you respond to that?
Well, I mean, a standardized test is a bunch of questions that are that are just there. It's not like a unit test where they've been studying that for a while. So they have to remember the math. And so if you don't remember how to do the problem, you're not going to be able to do well in the standardized test. So the point of building thinking classrooms is to get students thinking so that they will remember the content and be able to use their problem solving skills when they are taking a high stakes test. So I think by using building thinking classrooms, you're studying for the test. You're preparing them because they're going to have to problem solve. And that's what they're doing at the boards.
If you could give your younger self some advice back when you started, what would that piece of advice be?
Change is good. Teaching gets boring. For me, teaching gets boring if you do the same thing over and over again. So I moved from 7th grade to 8th grade and then to high school. But I think after a while, you get really comfortable with what you're teaching. And sometimes you're too comfortable and you need to change. There's always new things you can learn. And going to conferences is a great way to collaborate with other teachers, and everybody has something to say that could be potentially useful for you in your classroom.
I see. And what's next for you as an educator? Are there any strategies that you are excited to explore?
Well, there's a few more things in building thinking classrooms that I need to dig into. The last of the 14 practices is in assessments and how to assess students, and it's a completely different model than what I've been using. So that would be something I would like to look into. It's more looking at what they know and how they can show you what they know instead of the standard, oh, you got 5 points or you missed something, so I'm going to take away points. It's more looking at the whole student and what they can do. So I'm excited to look at that. And I'm also wanting to build more digital interactives to use in my classroom because I enjoy building them and the students. I enjoy seeing the students get excited about the math.
And I was curious, I know that you have a student teacher this year. How is she using learning to do the whiteboards and the building thinking classrooms too? So what do you think her prospects are of finding a job?
Well, I hope high. I mean, we are on a math teacher, so I think the challenge for her would be wanting to use building thinking classrooms. Will the administration in her new school be supportive of it? Also, there's pressure if you're the only one wanting to use it from the other math teachers. But hopefully it will spread and they will see her joy of teaching, and students will be talking and communicating about math, and the news will spread.
Very good. Thank you so much for being with me tonight or today and discussing this. I'm excited for you about the new way of teaching, getting students to think about math rather than teach. When I was teaching, it was the new math. Everybody began to think, whoa, we don't like the new math, whatever. That was many, many years ago. And so here I'm glad to see that you're doing innovative things here. So I want to thank my audience for being here today. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation as much as I did. Be sure to tell everybody about this, and my shows, my episodes are on YouTube at Shelby Wagner, as well as available on learningtodanceintherain.com. And maybe this has not been your problem that you need to solve, but you might find it in the other 64 that I have done. Take a look back at my website and that. And also I want to remind you that I am an author of Learning to Dance in the Rain, a book. Surviving Grief, Internet Dating, and Online Romance Scams. Sorry, I got that name all mixed up. And the Scams, a Resource Guide. And my new one is out in Kindle only at this time, Finding Love Again, a senior's guide to internet dating. I want to thank you for coming. And Robin, I thank you very much for your excellent expert advice here. And I will see everybody next Tuesday at noon on Eastern Standard Time, W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Bye now.